Well, good morning. It is good to see all of you today on day number 25 of our Lent video series. We're actually going to have two videos today, just to give you a heads up. Because of a schedule change, we're going to release tomorrow's video tonight at 8 o'clock. And so you may see an email this evening about tomorrow's video being released tonight. And it's just going to help us with our schedule this week between Donna sending out the email and myself. But just wanted to give you a heads up on that. But today I'm excited to start this morning with day number 25. And we are looking at this next title associated with Jesus as Master. Jesus being known as Master. And I actually have like 5 verses here that we are pulling this title from. And we're going to see a trend here. And so as I'm referencing all these verses, I want you to kind of try to notice a trend on what you see in these 5 verses. So the first place that we would say that Jesus is called Master is in Luke chapter 5, verse 5, where it says, "And Simon answering said unto him, Master, we have toiled all night and have taken nothing. Nevertheless, at thy word, I will let down the net." And so, again, this is Simon Peter talking to Jesus, and he's referring to Jesus as Master. And you notice that, nevertheless, at thy word, I will let down the net. And so he refers to Jesus as Master, and he decides to follow him. The next passage that we would see Jesus being referred to as Master is in Luke chapter 8, verse 24. And it said this, "And they came to him and awoke him, saying, Master, Master, we perish. Then he arose and rebuked the wind and the raging of the water, and they ceased, and there was calm." And again, this is Luke chapter 8, verse 24. Again, all these verses are from the King James Version, and you'll notice why here in a second on why that's one of the things that all these verses have in common. But let's look at another verse where we get the word Master. Luke chapter 9, verse 33. "And it came to pass, as they departed from him, Peter said unto Jesus, Master, it is good for us to be here. And let us make 3 tabernacles, one for thee, and one for Moses, and one for Elias," not knowing what he said. And this is Peter up on the Mount of Transfiguration, this amazing moment where the glory of God descends on this mountain, and Jesus is caught up in the glory of God. And Peter basically says, "Hey, let us make 3 tabernacles. Let us stay here a while." And he refers to Jesus as Master. And then finally, Luke chapter 17, verse 13, "And they lifted up their voices and said, Jesus, Master, have mercy on us." And this is 10 lepers calling towards Jesus, calling him Master when they saw him, and they were seeking healing from Jesus. And this is how they referred to Jesus being Master. Now, I guess, you may have caught on to some of the similarities between all of these passages. I mean, the first thing is, I use the King James Version because the King James Version does use the word Master the most. Now, the ESV and other versions, you may see other titles, and this kind of that is in place of the word Master. And this gets into the kind of the idea on what the original Greek word can be translated as. Most of the time, the original Greek word is translated as teacher. And so in some of your Bibles, it might be, Jesus might be referred to as being called teacher. But in the Gospel of Luke, there's actually something interesting that Luke does. He actually refers to Jesus in his Gospel as Master, and the other Gospels do not. So where you see the word Master in the other Gospels, you would see the word Rabbi. And so the question is why does Luke use the term Master instead of Rabbi in his Gospel? And the reason being this: first of all, there's 2 reasons. First of all, Luke's gospel was written to a Gentile audience in mind. And the term rabbi was predominantly a Jewish title. And so what he wanted to do is to avoid any confusion with his Gentile audience when he was writing his gospel out and he was telling the story of Jesus. He wanted to use the Greek word for master because master is a more generic term to who Jesus was, not rabbi. And so to understand Jesus as a master instead of a rabbi would have been a lot easier for the Gentile audience to read. And so that's why Luke, and you see this, how all of the passages that I referred to Jesus being as master was from the Gospel of Luke. But the second thing is, why does Luke use the term master instead of rabbi in his gospel? Well, the use of master emphasized Jesus' role, misspelling there, not just as a Jewish teacher, but as one who has universal authority. And so he wanted to emphasize how, it's not like Jesus is a rabbi that only has authority over the Jews. No, he is the master, which has authority over all things. And so Luke wanted to make sure that this term master was used instead of rabbi. Now, again, this might be confusing. Now, I guess the question then leads us to, well, why did I pick this term as one of the 40 different terms that we're looking at? If it's such a kind of a nuanced title given to Jesus only in the Gospel of Luke, then why did I wanted to emphasize that Jesus is also known as Master? Well, I think it has some key important kind of connections to our life today, and really you can use them as an application for our life today. When we see Jesus as being Master, then we see Jesus as having authority over our lives, right? So we don't necessarily understand the term master like many people throughout history have understood the term master, because there have been millions and millions of people that either were slaves that had a master. There was many people who lived under the under the authority of a king, and they saw the king as the master. They saw the master as the person who had authority over their life, and that one person could either choose if you're going to live or you're going to die, or that one person could choose the food that you have or the place you're going to live, because they are your master. And I believe, like, when we see Jesus as our master, then we place authority in what he says. And I think, like, that's such an important thing to keep in mind, and an important thing to adhere to, because the words that Jesus gives us in the Bible are not only his words, but they have authority over our lives. And so what he says is true, but what he says is something that he asks us to follow. And that leads us into the second thing here on why I believe it's important to recognize Jesus as master in our lives today. And that's really just a sign of discipleship. To recognize that when you say that Jesus is master over your life, and you don't have to necessarily call him that, but when you recognize Jesus as master over your life, you're recognizing that him as your leader, that you are going to follow. And again, like in the Bible, the term master comes from the term teacher. And so when you recognize him as master, you're recognizing him as your teacher as well. And you want to follow him. And that's what a disciple does. And so you're basically saying that I want to be a disciple when you reference Jesus as master. And I think that's why a second reason why I think it's important to remember. And then finally, a third reason to call Jesus master would be really kind of almost in connection to the reason why the 10 lepers called Jesus master. They recognize his divine power, his supernatural power over all things, including diseases, circumstances, whatever you're dealing with in life. When you recognize Jesus as master, you're basically saying that he's not only your leader, your teacher, but he also has supernatural power over your life, and he can make changes in your life. He can be there and lead you through different circumstances or whatever you're struggling with. Like, you're recognizing the divine nature of who Jesus is. Just like the 10 lepers recognize Jesus' divine nature. So I hope that you caught those things, and maybe one of those things resonates with you, and why it's so important to see Jesus as master. It's not just because it's a really cool thing to notice in the Bible, like only the Gospel of Luke uses the term master when it translates the word and used for rabbi or teacher. Now, I mean, that's fun information to have, but I think the application side of things is just so key. Recognizing his authority, recognizing that you want to be his disciple, and recognizing his supernatural power over our lives. I hope this resonates with you today, and I hope you continue to think about these names connected with Jesus, and I look forward to seeing you tonight at 8 o'clock. That'll be when the next video is released. God bless, and we'll see you then.